The broken promise. The morning light filtered through the dusty curtains of their small apartment as Zara. Malik carefully folded the last of her clothes into a worn suitcase. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of the conversation she'd had with Hassan just hours before. "You have to understand, Zara," Hassan had said, unable to meet her eyes. "My father's textile business is drowning in debt. The banks are threatening to seize everything we own." She had listened in stunned silence as her husband of 3 years explained how Farah's father, Mr. Tariq, had offered to save the Qureshi family business, but only if Hassan married his daughter. "What about our marriage?" Zara had whispered, her voice breaking. "What about the promises we made to each other?" Hassan had finally looked at her then, and she saw something in his eyes that chilled her more than his words ever could relieve. As if he'd been waiting for an excuse to escape their simple life together. "I'm sorry, Zara, I really am. But love doesn't pay the bills or save businesses. I have to think practically." Now, as she zipped up her suitcase, Zara could still hear the echo of those words. 3 years of marriage reduced to a business transaction? 3 years of believing in a love that had apparently never existed. She walked through their tiny apartment one last time. Past the small kitchen where she'd cooked Hassan's favorite meals, past the living room where they'd dreamed together about their future. Her eyes lingered on a framed photo of their wedding day, Hassan looking handsome in his cream-colored sherwani, and herself glowing in her mother's old red lahanga. She had been so happy that day, so certain that love would be enough. The irony wasn't lost on her that Hassan was trading their love for the very kind of arranged marriage they had both once rejected. When they'd first met at university, they had bonded over their shared belief that marriage should be about love, not money or status. They had faced their family's initial disapproval together, eventually winning them over with their genuine affection for each other. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Hassan stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in an expensive new suit she didn't recognize. "The divorce papers are ready," he said quietly, extending a manila envelope toward her. "I've made sure you'll receive a fair settlement." Zara looked at the envelope but didn't take it. "Fair?" she repeated softly. "Hassan, we built this life together. We scraped together every rupee for this apartment, for our furniture, for our dreams. How do you put a price on that, Zara? Please don't make this harder than it has to be." "Harder?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "Hassan, you're ending our marriage for money, and you're worried about me making it hard?"
It took
the envelope from his hands, her fingers brushing his briefly. Once, that simple touch would have sent warmth through her entire body. Now she felt nothing but emptiness. "I loved you," she said simply. "I really, truly loved you. And I thought you loved me too." Hassan's face crumpled slightly. "I did love you, Zara. I do love you. But love isn't enough to keep food on the table or maintain family honor. You'll understand someday when you're older. I'm not a child, Hassan. I'm your wife, or I was." She straightened her shoulders, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. "I understand perfectly. You've chosen money over love, security, over loyalty, and someone else over me. I understand it all." She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the door. Hassan stepped aside to let her pass, but as she reached the threshold, he caught her arm gently. "Where will you go?" "That's no longer your concern," she replied, gently pulling free from his grasp. "You made your choice, Hassan. Now I have to make mine." As she walked down the stairs of the apartment building for the last time, Zara heard Hassan call her name softly. She didn't turn around. She couldn't afford to. If she looked back now, she might crumble completely, and she needed every ounce of strength for whatever came next. Outside, the morning sun seemed brighter somehow, even as tears blurred her vision. She had nowhere to go but her childhood home, where her widowed mother still lived in their old neighborhood. It would mean admitting that her marriage had failed, that the love she had defended so fiercely had proven to be one-sided. But as she walked away from the life she had known, Zara made herself a promise. She would rebuild. She would find her worth again, not in someone else's love, but in her own strength. Hassan had chosen money over her, but she would choose dignity over bitterness. She didn't know it yet, but this ending was actually a beginning. Sometimes the universe breaks your heart not to destroy you, but to make room for something infinitely better. And sometimes, when you think you've lost everything, you're actually being prepared to receive everything you never knew you deserved. The old Zara, the one who had believed that love conquered, always walking away with that suitcase. The woman who would emerge from this heartbreak would be stronger, wiser, and ready for a love that wouldn't require her to compete with gold. Starting over 6 months had passed since Zara moved back into her childhood home with her mother, Amy. The small house in the old part of the city felt both comforting and confining. Every corner held memories of a simpler time, when her biggest worry was completing her art assignments on time. "Beta, you can't keep painting until midnight every night," Amy said gently, appearing in the doorway of what used to be Zara's teenage bedroom. Now, it served as both her sleeping quarters and makeshift art studio, canvases propped against every available wall. Zara looked up from the landscape she was working on, a sunset over the hills outside the city, painted from memory of a trip she and Hassan had taken during happier times. She realized with a start that she'd been painting their memories, trying to make sense of what had gone wrong. "I can't sleep anyway," Zara admitted, setting down her brush. "And painting helps me think." "What you need is to get out of this house," Amy said firmly. "Living in the past won't change it, Beta. You're a talented teacher with a master's degree in fine arts. The world needs what you have to offer." Zara sighed, wiping her paint-stained hands on an old cloth. Her mother was right. The small savings she'd managed to keep from the divorce settlement wouldn't last forever. She couldn't burden Amy indefinitely. The next morning, Zara dressed carefully in her most professional shalwar kameez and set out to visit schools in the area. Her first stop was the prestigious Crescent Academy, where the principal barely glanced at her credentials before informing her that they required at least 5 years of teaching experience. The second school, an expensive private institution, seemed more promising until the principal asked about her family situation. "We prefer our teachers to be settled in their personal lives," the woman had said diplomatically. "Our parents are quite particular about the moral influence on their children." By afternoon, Zara's confidence was wavering. She found herself in a different neighborhood entirely, one where the houses were smaller, the streets narrower, but the children's laughter seemed just as bright as anywhere else. "Excuse me? Are you lost?" Zara turned to find a young girl, perhaps 10 years old, looking at her with curious brown eyes. The child wore a school uniform that had seen better days, but her face was scrubbed clean, and her hair was neatly braided. "Looking for the Neural Realm Primary School," Zara said. "Do you know where it is?" The girl's face lit up. "That's my school. I'm newer. Are you going to be our new art teacher?" "Please say yes, we've been without one for 3 months now." Something about the child's enthusiasm made Zara smile for the first time in weeks. "I'm hoping to be, if they'll have me." "They will," Noor said confidently. "Nobody wants to teach here because we don't have fancy supplies or rich parents, but we really love to learn. Come on, I'll show you." Noor led her through the narrow streets, chattering about her favorite subjects and her dreams of becoming an artist someday. Zara felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't the prestigious position she might have imagined, but there was something pure about this child's excitement that reminded her why she'd wanted to teach in the first place. The school was housed in an old building that had clearly seen better days. Paint peeled from the walls, and the courtyard was small and dusty. But when Noor pushed open the door to what served as the art room, Zara saw possibility everywhere. "The last teacher left all her supplies," Noor explained, gesturing to boxes of paints, brushes, and papers that had been carefully organized despite their obviously limited quantity. She said the children here didn't appreciate art enough. But she was wrong. We just don't know how to show it properly. The principal, Mrs. Rashid, was a kind-faced woman in her 50s who welcomed Zara warmly, despite her simple office and humble circumstances. "I won't lie to you," Mrs. Rashid said. "After reviewing Zara's credentials, we can't pay much. Most of our students come from working families, shopkeepers, laborers. They can barely afford the basic fees, let alone extra supplies for art class. But if you're looking for children who will value every lesson you give them, you won't find better students anywhere in the city." Zara thought of the principals who had questioned her qualifications and her personal life. Here was a woman offering her a chance based on her skills and her heart. Nothing more. "When can I start?" Zara asked. That evening, as Zara walked home, through the bustling market street, she felt lighter than she had in months. She stopped at a small art supply shop and spent nearly half of her remaining savings on basic materials for her new classroom. The elderly shopkeeper, noticing her excitement, threw in extra brushes at no charge. "For the children," he said with a knowing smile. "Teaching is a noble profession." At home, Amy took one look at Zara's face and began preparing her favorite. "Dinner without being asked?" "You found something good today," she observed. "I found a place where I'm needed," Zara replied, spreading her new art supplies across the kitchen table like treasures. "The pay isn't much, Amy. I hope you don't mind having me around for a while longer." "Beta," her mother said, sitting down beside her, "your father and I never had much money, but we were rich in love and purpose. Money comes and goes, but the joy of meaningful work, that's a blessing that lasts forever." That night, Zara painted again, but this time it wasn't memories of the past. Instead, she found herself painting children's faces, eager, hopeful, full of possibility. She painted until dawn, preparing lesson plans in her head and imagining the projects she would create with her new students. When Hassan had left her, Zara thought her life was over. But as she prepared for her first day at Nurium Primary School, she realized that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted was the only way to discover what you actually needed. She didn't know it yet, but among her students would be a little girl whose family would soon change her life in ways she could never imagine. Love, real love, was often disguised as ordinary moments, a child's enthusiasm, a principal's kindness, a mother's wisdom. Zara was about to learn that sometimes the smallest classrooms held the biggest hearts, and that teaching children to see beauty in the world would eventually teach her to see the beauty in herself again. The Hidden Angel 3 weeks into her new job, Zara had already fallen in love with her students. Each morning brought fresh energy as children rushed into her classroom with excitement about their art projects. But it was Noor who had captured her heart completely. The little girl stayed after class every day, helping Zara clean brushes and organize supplies. During these quiet moments, Noor would chatter about everything and nothing, her favorite colors, her dreams of painting the mountains she'd never seen, her worry about her older brother, who worked too much and never smiled anymore. "My mama died when I was 5, Noor had confided one afternoon while carefully washing paintbrushes. "Bai says I have her eyes, but I don't remember what she looked like when she was happy." Zara's heart ached for this wise little soul who spoke of such heavy things with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child who had learned too young that life could be difficult. It was on a particularly cold Thursday morning that Zara noticed Noor shivering in her thin sweater. While other children had warm jackets and lunch boxes filled with homemade food, Noor often came to school with just a small piece of bread and weak tea in a battered thermos. During lunch break, Zara gently approached the subject. "Noor, Beta, are you warm enough? I have an extra shawl in my bag." The child's cheeks reddened with embarrassment. "I'm fine, miss. Bai says I should never take things from others. He works very hard to take care of me." "What does your brother do?" Zara asked carefully. "He has many jobs," Noor said proudly. "He delivers things on his motorcycle. He helps at the construction site, and sometimes he works at night too. Never sleeps much, but he always makes sure I have school fees and books." That evening, Zara couldn't stop thinking about Noor's situation. She had seen the child's brother once from a distance, a young man who looked barely out of his teens, thin and tired, picking up Noor on an old motorcycle that had definitely seen better days. The next day, Zara made a decision that would change everything, though she had no way of knowing it at the time. She arrived at school early and carefully arranged a small care package in Noor's desk, a warm knitted scarf in soft pink, a lunchbox filled with homemade sandwiches and fruit, and new colored pencils that she'd bought with her own money. When Noor discovered the gifts, tears filled her eyes. "Miss, I can't take these," she whispered. "I will be upset if he thinks I'm taking charity." Zara knelt down to Noor's level. "These aren't charity, Beta. When someone cares about you, they want to share what they have. It's not about money, it's about love. Your brother works hard because he loves you, and I'm sharing these things because I care about you too. But why do you care about me? Nur asked innocently. You could teach at fancy schools with rich children who can buy you presents. The question caught Zara off guard. She thought of Hassan, of his choice to trade their love for wealth, of all the ways she'd been told that money mattered more than heart. Because you have something more valuable than money, Nur. You have kindness, curiosity, and a beautiful spirit. Those are the things that make someone truly rich. From that day forward, Zara made it her quiet mission to ensure Nur never went hungry or cold. She began bringing extra food by accident, leaving warm clothes that were too small for her, and always had spare art supplies that needed to be used up. Other teachers noticed, and some disapproved. During lunch one day, Mrs. Ahmed, from the mathematics department, cornered Zara in the staff room. You're setting a dangerous precedent, she said sharply. If you start giving handouts to one child, they'll all expect it. These families need to learn responsibility, not dependency. She's just a 10-year-old girl, Zara replied quietly. She didn't choose her circumstances. Neither did you. But you don't see the rest of us adopting students, Mrs. Ahmed retorted. You're divorced and living with your mother. You can barely take care of yourself. The words stung because they held a grain of truth. Zara's salary was indeed modest, and every rupee she spent on Nur was money she couldn't spare. But when she saw the little girl's face light up, when she watched Nur share her lunch with classmates who had even less, Zara knew she was making the right choice. What Zara didn't know was that her acts of kindness had not gone unnoticed by the person who mattered most. Every evening, when Daniel Shah came to pick up his little sister from school, he had begun to notice changes in Nur. She was warmer, happier, and more excited about her classes than she'd been since starting at the school. At 28, Janile had been Nur's guardian since she was 5 and he was 23. Their parents had died in a car accident, leaving him to raise his baby sister. While finishing his own education and building the business that would eventually make him one of the city's most successful young entrepreneurs. But Nur didn't know about his wealth. To protect her from fortune hunters and to ensure she grew up with proper values, Daniel had chosen to let her believe they were just getting by. He lived modestly when he was with her, drove an old motorcycle instead of his luxury cars, and wore simple clothes that wouldn't raise questions. My art teacher's like an angel, Nur had told him one evening as they shared dinner in their small apartment, one of several properties he owned, the only one Nur knew about. Why do you say that? He asked, helping her with her homework. Today Sarah came to school without breakfast again because her father is sick and can't work. Miss Zara saw Sarah crying and quietly gave her half of her own sandwich. She pretended she wasn't hungry, but I saw her stomach make noise during art class. Daniel's attention sharpened. He had built his fortune through careful observation and smart decisions, and he had learned to recognize genuine character when he saw it. Tell me more about your teacher, he said casually. She's the best teacher in the whole world, Nur said enthusiastically. She never makes us feel bad when we don't have proper supplies. Yesterday, Ahmed's paintbrush broke, and he started crying because his family can't afford a new one. Miss Zara gave him her own special brush, the expensive one she keeps in her. But Gand told him it was magic and would make his paintings extra beautiful. That night, after Nur was asleep, Daniel found himself thinking about this teacher, who gave away her own food and expensive art supplies to children who weren't even her own. In his world of business deals and profit margins, such selflessness was rare. He decided it was time to meet this angel who had unknowingly captured not just his sister's heart, but his curiosity as well. The next afternoon, instead of waiting outside on his motorcycle, Daniel parked around the corner and walked into the school. He told himself he just wanted to see this remarkable teacher who had made such a difference in Nur's life. What he didn't expect was to find a woman whose quiet grace and genuine warmth would make him question everything he thought he knew about love, wealth, and what truly mattered in life. Sometimes angels don't appear with wings and halos. Sometimes they appear as ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they think no one is watching. And sometimes the person who needs rescuing isn't the one receiving the kindness, is the one whose heart has forgotten how to hope. Paths crossed. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the school courtyard. When Daniel finally stepped through the gates of Nurium Primary School, he had visited many places in his business dealings, luxury hotels, corporate offices, exclusive clubs, but something about this humble school felt different. There was warmth here, laughter echoing from classrooms despite the peeling paint and modest facilities. He followed the sound of children's voices and found himself standing in the doorway of the art room. What he saw made him pause. A woman in a simple cream-colored dupatta was kneeling on the floor beside a small boy who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The child was crying quietly while she spoke to him in the gentlest voice. "It's all right, Betrayal," she was saying. "Art isn't about making perfect pictures. It's about expressing what's in your heart. But everyone else's paintings look so good." The boy sniffled. "Mine just looks like mud." The woman who Daniel realized must be the teacher Noor spoke of so fondly, carefully examined the child's painting. It was, admittedly, a brown mess that barely resembled the landscape assignment the other children were working on. "You know what I see when I look at this?" she said thoughtfully. "I see earth that's ready for planting. I see the richness that comes before beautiful flowers bloom. Sometimes the most important beauty is the kind we can't see yet." She dipped her own brush in paint and with just a few careful strokes, began to add tiny green shoots emerging from the brown earth. See, her painting wasn't mud at all, it was potential. The little boy's face transformed with wonder and pride. Round the room, other children had stopped their own work to watch, and Daniel could see the respect and affection in their eyes as they looked at their teacher. "Miss Zara," called a girl from across the room, not Noor, but another student. "Can you help me mix colors? I want to paint the sunset like in your painting at home. You been to Mrs. House?" asked another child with excitement. "Silly." The first girl laughed. "She showed us the photo on her phone. She paints the most beautiful sunsets when she's sad, but then she gives them away to people who need something pretty in their homes." Daniel found himself studying this woman more intently. She was beautiful in a quiet, understated way, not the polished beauty of the women in his usual social circles, but something more genuine. Her dupatta had a small paint stain on it. Her hands were smudged with colors, and there was a tiredness around her eyes that spoke of someone who had known sorrow but chosen kindness anyway. "Bye!" Noor's delighted voice broke through his observations. His sister came running toward him, her face glowing with happiness. "You came inside. I told you Miss Zara was wonderful." "Miss, this is my brother Daniel. He's the one who works so hard to take care of me." Zara looked up from where she was still kneeling beside Billa, and for a moment their eyes met directly. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that had nothing to do with sight and everything to do with souls recognizing each other. "Assalamu alaikum," Zara said softly, standing and smoothing her dupatta with paint-stained hands. "Noor speaks of you constantly. She's very proud of her big brother." "Why, alaykumo assalam," Daniel replied, finding himself oddly nervous. In boardrooms with millionaire investors, he was confident and articulate. Standing in this simple classroom, with this gentlewoman, he felt tongue-tied. "Miss Zara is the best teacher in the whole world," Noor announced proudly. "She taught me that art comes from the heart, not from expensive supplies. She always shares her lunch with children who forget theirs." Zara's cheeks reddened slightly. "Noor, Beta, you don't need to. It's true, though," piped up Bilal, still holding his transformed painting. "Yesterday you gave Fatima your own sweater when she was cold, and you told everyone it was because you were too hot. And last week you bought new brushes for the whole class with your own money," added another student. "Mrs. Rashid told my mama that you spend more on us than you earn." Daniel watched Zara's face grow more flustered with each revelation. She was clearly uncomfortable being praised, which only made her more remarkable in his eyes. In his experience, people who did good deeds usually wanted recognition for them. "Children, please pack up your supplies," Zara said gently, changing the subject. "Your families will be waiting." As the students began cleaning up their work areas, Daniel found himself helping automatically organizing brushes, wiping down tables. Zara looked surprised but grateful. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "It's the least I can do," he replied. "Noor has told me how much you've done for her. For all of them." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, while Nora chattered with her classmates. Finally, when they were alone, Daniel spoke again. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly. "Noor has been different since she started in your class. Happier, more confident. She's been through a lot for such a young child, and seeing her smile the way she does now." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "It means everything to me." Zara set down the brushes she was holding and looked at him directly. "She's a special child, so bright and kind and resilient. You've done an incredible job raising her." "I've tried," Daniel said, "but I'm just her brother. I can provide for her material needs, but what you've given her, this sense of worth, of being seen and valued, that's something I could never teach her." Something in his voice made Zara study his face more carefully. There was pain there, old and deep, but also fierce love and protection. "May I ask," she said hesitantly, "about your parents?" "Car accident when she was 5, and I was 23. He said simply. "It's been just us since then." It must have been incredibly difficult. "The hardest part wasn't the responsibility," Daniel admitted. "It was watching her grieve and not knowing how to help her heal." "You've done more for her emotional well-being in a few weeks than I managed in years." Zara shook her head. "You gave her stability, security, love. Sacrificed your own youth to raise her. Don't underestimate what that means." They were interrupted by Noor bouncing back over to them. "Can Miss Zara come for dinner sometime? I want to show her my drawings at home, and you make the best biryani in the world." Both adults looked embarrassed by the suggestion, but for different reasons. Zara was thinking of the impropriety of having dinner with a male student's guardian. Daniel was thinking of his modest apartment and wondering how to explain why a supposedly struggling working man had such good quality furnishings. "That's very kind, Noor," Zara said gently. "But please, miss." Noor's eyes were bright with hope. "I never has friends over. He works all the time and never talks to anyone except me. He needs friends too." The innocent observation hung in the air. Daniel felt exposed, as if this perceptive child had revealed more about his loneliness than he'd ever admitted to himself. Double quotes, Zara began, clearly torn. "It would be an honor," Daniel said quietly, "if you're comfortable with it. Nothing fancy, just a simple meal to thank you for everything you've done for my sister." Zara looked between brother and sister Noor's hopeful face and Daniel's sincere eyes and felt her careful walls beginning to crack. Since Hassan had left, she'd been so focused on protecting herself from more pain that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be invited into someone's life, not because she was needed, but because she was wanted. "All right," she said softly. "That would be lovely." As they walked out of the school together, Noor skipping ahead while Daniel and Zara walked side by side, neither of them realized they were being watched from across the street. Hassan Qureshi sat in his expensive new car, having just dropped off some documents at a nearby office. He had seen the simple school and, out of curiosity about his old neighborhood, had glanced over only to see his ex-wife laughing with a man and child like they were a family. The sight filled him with an emotion he couldn't quite name. It wasn't jealousy exactly, but something more complex. Regret, perhaps, mixed with recognition. Zara looked genuinely happy in a way she hadn't during their final months together, as he drove away in his luxury sedan toward his mansion and his wealthy wife. Hassan found himself wondering if he had made the wrong choice after all. But it was too late now. He had chosen his path. Zara was clearly finding hers. What he didn't know was that the simple man he'd seen walking beside his ex-wife was worth more than Hassan could ever dream of earning. But unlike Hassan, Daniel had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts, but in the love and respect of people who chose to stay in your life, not for what you could give them, but for who you were. The charity evening 2 weeks after their first meeting, Zara had shared 3 simple dinners with Daniel and Noor, Each evening had been a revelation, discovering that this quiet man who worked multiple jobs to support his sister was also incredibly well-read, thoughtful, and possessed a gentle humor that made her laugh in ways she'd almost forgotten. What she didn't know was that each evening had been equally revelatory for Daniel, who found himself looking forward to these modest meals, more than the elaborate business dinners he usually attended. Watching Zara interact with Nur, seeing her genuine joy over simple pleasures like homemade chai and conversation, he was falling for her in a way that had nothing to do with wealth or status. It was on a Friday evening that their peaceful world was disrupted by an unexpected invitation. The Karachi Education Foundation is hosting their annual charity gala, Mrs. Rashid announced during the teachers' meeting. They've specifically requested that our school send a representative since we've been selected as one of the beneficiary institutions this year. Zara's heart sank. She had no appropriate clothing for such an event, and the thought of mingling with the city's elite made her uncomfortable. "I think you should go," said Mrs. Ahmed, the mathematics teacher who had previously criticized Zara's generosity towards students. "After all, you're the one always talking about the children needing more supplies and support." Mrs. Rashid looked around the room. "It's true that we need someone articulate who can speak about our students' needs. Zara, would you be willing?" Unable to refuse without seeming selfish, Zara reluctantly agreed. That evening, she shared her dilemma with Ami while they sorted through her limited wardrobe. "I have nothing appropriate for such a function," Zara sighed. "These people will be wearing designer clothes worth more than I earn in a year." "Beta, you have something more valuable than expensive clothes," Ami said firmly. "You have dignity and purpose. That's a beauty no money can buy." In the end, Zara borrowed a simple black shalwar kameez from her cousin and paired it with her mother's old pearl earrings. She looked elegant in an understated way. Though she felt nervous as she approached the five-star hotel where the gala was being held, what she didn't know was that Daniel had also received an invitation, not as a school representative, but as one of the foundation's major donors. He attended such events regularly, writing generous checks and maintaining the relationships necessary for his business. Tonight, however, he found himself hoping to catch a glimpse of the teacher who had been occupying his thoughts. The ballroom was magnificent, filled with Karachi's social elite dressed in their finest. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables laden with expensive flowers and gleaming silverware. Zara felt completely out of place as she made her way through the crowd. She was standing near the registration table, trying to find someone from the foundation to introduce herself to, when a familiar voice made her freeze. Well, look what the wind blew in." Zara turned to find Hassan approaching with a woman who could only be his new wife, Farah. Both were dressed impeccably, Hassan in an expensive tuxedo, and Farah in a golden designer gown that probably cost more than Zara's annual salary. "Hassan," Zara said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I heard you were teaching at some charity school now," Hassan said, his tone carrying a subtle mockery. "How, noble of you." Farah looked Zara up and down with barely concealed disdain. "This is your ex-wife," she said to Hassan, not bothering to lower her voice. "The one who couldn't understand practical necessities." Several nearby guests had begun to notice the conversation, and Zara felt heat rising in her cheeks. "Zara always was idealistic," Hassan continued, seemingly enjoying his wife's audience. "She never understood that love doesn't pay bills or maintain social standing. I suppose teaching children from the slums is about the right level for someone with such limited vision." "It's so sad," Farah added, with false sympathy, "when people can't adapt to reality." "You mean look at you still wearing the same simple clothes, still living in that old neighborhood. Hassan told me you actually give your own money to students. How impractical." Zara felt the familiar sting of humiliation washing over her, but this time it was worse because it was public. Several wealthy guests had stopped their conversations to watch the drama unfold. She could see pity and judgment in their eyes, and the urge to flee was overwhelming. "At least she found her level," Hassan said with a cruel smile. "Teaching charity cases in a rundown school is much more appropriate than trying to fit into a world where success actually matters. Excuse me? The voice was quiet, but carried such authority that everyone in the immediate vicinity turned toward it. Zara looked up to see Daniel approaching, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit that made him look like he belonged in this glittering world. But it was the expression on his face that made her breath catch cold anger mixed with protective intensity. I couldn't help but overhear, Daniel continued, his voice remaining calm, but his eyes focused intently on Hassan. And I feel compelled to correct some misconceptions. Hassan looked annoyed at the interruption. I'm sorry, do we know each other? Daniel Shah, he said simply, extending his hand with practiced business courtesy. Several nearby guests visibly straightened at the name, clearly recognizing it, even if Hassan didn't. I had the privilege of visiting Millionaire school recently. Daniel continued, his attention turning to the growing crowd of listeners. What I witnessed there was remarkable. I saw a teacher who spends her own salary on supplies for children who can't afford them. I saw someone who gives her lunch to hungry students and pretends she's not hungry herself. I saw an educator who teaches children not just art and academics, but dignity and self-worth. His gaze shifted back to Hassan, and there was steel in his voice now. In my experience, the people who truly understand success are those who measure it not in what they can take from the world, but in what they can give to it. Farah shifted uncomfortably. Well, that's a very romantic view, but romantic. Daniel interrupted, and now his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms. Let me tell you what I find romantic. I find it romantic that someone would choose to work with disadvantaged children when she could easily find a more lucrative position. I find it romantic that someone would value character over comfort, purpose over profit, turned to Zara, and his expression softened completely. Miss Zara represents everything that's right with education and everything that's noble about teaching. The children she works with are lucky to have someone who sees their potential rather than their limitations. The crowd had grown larger, and Zara could see recognition dawning on several faces as they realized who was speaking. Hassan looked increasingly uncomfortable as he began to understand that he had just publicly insulted someone under the protection of one of the city's most influential men. Furthermore, Daniel continued, addressing the crowd now rather than Hassan, I hope everyone here tonight will consider supporting Millionaire School. Its institutions like their Zand, teachers like Miss Zarada, are truly changing lives and building our city's future. An older woman in an expensive sari stepped forward. Mr. Shah, you speak very passionately about this school. Are you personally involved with their programs? I am now, Daniel replied without hesitation. In fact, I'd like to announce tonight that Shah Enterprises will be making a substantial donation to fund their art program and provide scholarships for their most promising students. The announcement sent murmurs of approval through the crowd. Several other business leaders immediately began discussing their own potential contributions. And Zara found herself surrounded by people wanting to hear more about her school, and students in the commotion, Hassan and Farah quietly slipped away. But not before Zara caught the expression of shocked realization on Hassan's face as he finally understood exactly who had just offended his ex-wife. As the evening continued, Zara found herself in conversations with potential donors and supporters, her nervousness replaced by genuine enthusiasm as she spoke about her students' potential. Throughout it all, Daniel remained nearby, might hovering, but present, or supporting her with his quiet confidence. It wasn't until they were finally alone, on the hotel's garden terrace, away from the crowd and noise, that Zara could fully process what had happened. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly, though her voice carried profound gratitude. Yes, I did, Daniel replied simply. What they said about you, it was wrong. More than wrong, it was cruel and completely untrue. But you made yourself a target by defending me. Hassan will probably try to find out who you are, what your connection is to me, ... Daniel was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the city lights. Zara, there's something I need to tell you about who I am, about my situation. She turned to look at him, noting the serious expression on his face. I haven't been entirely honest with you, he continued. Not about anything important, about my feelings or my values, but about my ... circumstances. Before he could continue, Noor's voice called out from the terrace doorway. Bye, Miss Zara. I've been looking everywhere for you. They turned to see Noor running toward them, dressed in a beautiful party frock, followed by an elegant older woman. Noor, Zara said in Kanth.